I'm Luke Storey. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. All right, Naveen Jain, here we are, man. Second time. We had the best conversation last time.
We had a long
We did. I know. When you walked in today, you're like, I can't do a 3-hour show today. Yeah. So we're gonna like get right into the heart of it. But I just love what you're doing in the world. I love your enthusiasm. You're just like, every time I hear you on a podcast or see you speak, you're just ecstatic about the world and what you're doing in it. And right now in the world, there's a lot to be concerned about. You know what I mean? I guess there always is, but the last couple of years have been like, wow. Yet here you are, you know, doing great things in the world and being very positive. So I just want to honor and acknowledge you for that.
Well, Luke, I'm going to respond right back to you that, you know, the amazing work that you do and bringing the information to people, I think it's just so selfless thing to do, to dedicate your life to actually educating people and making them better, giving them tools that you do to actually help them improve themselves every single day.
Well, thank you for that. It's a labor of love, you know. It's just, I find people like you, and I find different technologies and things, you know, just spiritual teachers, all the things out there. There's just never an end to the fascinating, inspiring people in the world. And when I find them for myself and I gain value from what they offer, I'm just compelled to tell people about it. Just, you know, get on my soapbox and just say, hey, you guys, over here, there's an answer, you know, and everyone has a little piece of the answer. So yeah, here we are. So when I last spoke to you, Viome was kind of in its first phase. And for those watching me on the video, we're going to talk about what's inside this box, Cole, and this box soon. But you guys were kind of in your inception, and you had one test, which was a stool sample test, and you run these analytics on it and then give the client, which in this case was me, back some information about my health. And now you guys have, like 4 different tests, and you're doing this much more comprehensive reporting, which I think is really interesting. So maybe you could just give us a little overview on what's happened since our last episode, and we'll link to that in the show notes, by the way, at lukestorey.com/Naveen, Naveen. You know, where have you guys come since we last talked?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who actually is joining us here, because this conversation is about them. We are just being part of that. At the end of the day, we all have to realize there is only one thing that matters in this life, which is our health. Because when we lose that, we can't do anything that we want to do. That means our purpose, our mission for living, all dies when we actually lose our health. So when we are young, we sacrifice our health to generate wealth. And as we get older, we sacrifice our wealth to get our health back.
Oh my God, that's so true.
And it's just so amazing to see that, you know, people really think of health as something that old people have. And they would do anything at that point. They would give up everything in their life to get the things that they want to do. So I want to, acknowledge people who are listening to this conversation to know that this is about you. There's no reason for human body to actually get sick. We need to start taking control of our own action, take responsibility for our own action. And what I mean by that is we blame our genes. We blame that, it's a bad luck when we get sick. Well, let me tell you, it is matter of bad choices we make every day that makes us sick. Not because we have bad luck. It is actually the bad choices. So people, sometime knowingly, sometime unknowingly, are eating foods that are actually maybe making them sick. So what we do at Viome is fundamentally to understand what is happening inside the human body. So when we started the company, our belief was simple, that let's go back to what we already knew 2,200 years ago when Hippocrates said, all diseases begin in the gut. Let food be thy medicine. Let thy medicine be the food. So we are not the inventor of this concept of there is something happening in your gut. Well, what's happening in the gut is 39 trillion microbes that are sitting in your gut.
Wow.
And what's interesting to me, Luke, was as we started to look at the problems, we realized that everyone in the industry was asking the same wrong question, which is everyone wanted to find out what organisms are in people's gut that might be making people sick. And what we realized was, and this is a breakthrough for us, was what if it's not the organism that really matters? It is what that organism is doing in the environment that it finds itself in. Just like the people, right? You take a person, put them in a good environment, good behavior. Put them in a bad environment, bad behavior. Is it the person or is it the environment? And what we realized was, what if we can focus on what these microbes are actually producing? Are they producing good stuff or bad stuff? So punish the sin, not the sinner. Right? Understand what the bad thing they're doing and stop them from doing the bad thing, rather than saying, let's kill that thing because they're doing the bad thing. Right? And I think that's a fundamental change. Now, what had changed since then is to realize that what we realized was that what happens in the gut, unfortunately, doesn't stay in the gut. It changes us as humans. We as humans are really a walking, talking ecosystem. About 100 trillion microbes and a sprinkle of human DNA that we get from our mom and dad. And we are so proud of our genes that we get from mom and dad without realizing less than 1% of the genes in our human body actually come from them, and rest is all acquired after we are born.
Wow.
Right? When we go through the first time the baby goes through the birth canal, every time we meet people, we inhale, we exhale, we're touching people, we're eating food. All of that is changing our microbiome. What had changed in the last couple of years since we last talked is now we're looking at the interaction between the gut microbial activity and the human host. So what do? Instead of just looking at the gut microbiome through stool, now we do a finger prick blood. And then we added saliva on top of that. What we realized was that what gut microbiome was 7 years ago, we're starting to see the same thing in your oral microbiome in your mouth. Well, it turns out, I don't know about you, Luke, my mom used to always say, eat slowly, chew your food. And I wonder why my mom keeps saying that. Is she worried that somehow I'm going to choke with that food? Well, it turns out actually she was a real scientist. What she meant was, when you chew your food and you eat slowly, your saliva, the oral microbiome, start to mix with your food, start to pre-digest your food, so at least the nutrition gets absorbed, because when you don't allow the oral microbiome to pre-digest your food, that food is no longer being, nutrition is no longer being absorbed in your body. Right? So that's the first part. Other thing is, just like when you have a leaky gut, the microbes are starting to now go into your blood, causing inflammation in the body. Same thing happens when you have leaky gum. When you have gums are bleeding, what's happening? All those bacteria and viruses on your oral microbiome now going into the blood, causing inflammation. In the last 2 years, what we have learned is the number one cause for Alzheimer is actually turning out to be oral microbiome. Number one cause for many of other neurodegenerative diseases, including things like autism, is also linked to oral microbiome. Heart disease, and including colon cancer, actually is now being linked to the microbiome in your saliva. So we do is look at the human body at the top of the tube, the bottom of the tube, and the other side of the tube. So we take a finger prick blood, spit off your saliva, touch off your stool, and then we analyze everything. And when we analyze, what do we give back to you? We tell you everything that's happening in your body, not just your oral health or dental health or gum health. We give you your cognitive health. We give you your heart health, your immune health. We give you your biological age. And then we go much deeper if you want to go. We give you your LDL pathways and your serotonin production, your GABA productions. You can talk as dirty as you want. You want information, it's all there. But that's just the beginning. Then we tell you what to do about it. Because many times people do these tests and say, all that is wonderful. You gave me all this. Now what? And now what is where we shine. So not only we tell you what's happening in your body, we now tell you, here are the foods you should not eat, even though everyone thinks they're healthy, they're not healthy for you. So we can tell you that, hey, don't eat avocado. Everyone tells you it's healthy. Guess what? Your uric acid production is too high. Don't eat avocado. People may tell you spinach is good for you. Well, guess what? It may or may not be good for you if you have very poor oxalate metabolism. Broccoli may not be good for you if you have high sulfide production, because broccoli contains large amount of sulfate that makes it sulfide. So literally, there is no such thing as universal healthy food. The food can be good for one person and may be harmful to someone else. As we know, one man's food is another man's poison, right? And that's literally what we learn. The difference between what we do, and you may hear about a lot of other companies, we ask a different question. Instead of looking at your DNA, which everyone in the industry thought once they understood the human DNA, they can solve the problem. Well, to me, it was such a simple thing. And even though everyone thinks what we did was such a revolution, we all knew from the time we were in high school biology class that our DNA never changes. We are born with the DNA that we die with. Now, if you do my DNA test and you tell me a certain diet that works for me based on my DNA, and then I gain 200 pounds, my DNA is still the same. Should I be eating the same food? Probably not. Now I get diabetes. My DNA is still the same. Should I still be eating the same food? Probably not. Now I get heart disease. My DNA is still the same. I hope somebody tells me to change my lifestyle now. Guess what? Now I die. And you do my DNA test 10 years after I die, it's still the same DNA. It never changes. In fact, you can look at DNA of a dinosaur today, 65 billion years ago. So if DNA can't even tell you you're dead or alive, how will it ever tell you you're healthy or sick? I think about it.
That's funny.
And that's literally what people do. They say, based on your DNA, you should be doing this. It's like, really?
Is this then the fundamental difference between looking at just genes versus gene expression?
Oh my God, look, you are absolutely correct. Your genes are the same, but what they express is constantly changing. And that's the fundamental.
So moving target.
Moving target. And so what we do is we analyze your gene expression. Because by gene expression, we know what is being expressed. And I think one of the ways I, as a naive person, I started to understand is we all have thoughts. There are some good thoughts and there are some bad thoughts. If you don't express the bad thoughts, there is no crime. You can have the bad thoughts, just don't express them, right? So the point is same thing with your genes. Genes are like an alphabet. It can write anything you want. You can write a poetry, you can write a thriller, or you can write a drama. It's the same alphabet. And what you write is what you become. And we're looking at what is being written. That's called RNA, gene expression. Right? So we look at your mRNA, we look at your non-coding RNA, every gene that's expressed. So imagine when we're looking at finger prick blood, we're analyzing all of the human gene expression, whether it is your inflammatory markers like cytokines or your mitochondria. We're looking at everything. Similarly, when we're looking at saliva, not only we're looking at the oral microbial gene expression, we're also looking at the human gene expression that are coming from your, the cheek lining or the gum linings. And that tells us how they are interacting with each other. Same thing with the stool. And once we do all of that, it allows us to even tell you, hey, don't take NAD. Everyone thinks you're going to live longer with NAD. Guess what? NAD is actually maybe harming you because you have high cellular senescence. So don't take NR, NMN, or NAD. So we are able to tell you don't take vitamin B3 because you have high uric acid production. Don't take turmeric because you actually have high bile acid production. But you do need 22 milligram of ashwagandha every day, 27 milligram of maybe berberine every day, right? And we need 18 milligram of lycopene every day. So we literally tell you what ingredients in what dosage you need, whether it's a vitamin, mineral, herbs, digestive enzyme, amino acids, probiotics, prebiotics. And we go a step further. We built a robotic compounding pharmacy that literally makes the formula for you on demand every single month. So as your body changes, we make the formula, put them in a capsule, and send it off to you.
That's crazy. As you speak about this part of it, I'm thinking about the tens of thousands of dollars I've spent on supplements, right?
And now, by the way, you can get them for $99.
Really?
Every month.
That's crazy.
Right? Probiotics for $49. All your custom-made supplement for $99. Everything for $149, and you're done.
Going back to the oral microbiome and how you were talking about your mother telling you to chew food, and I relate. My elders were always telling me that, and I've gotten better at it. But something I've wondered about that, because it does make sense. You're kind of sending biosignals to your gut, like, hey, here's what's coming down the pipe, right?
Exactly.
But sometimes I think when I'm swallowing a big handful of supplements,
Yeah.
that they're like little bombs that are just going off in my gut. And my gut's like, what is all this powder that's now releasing? So when it's not too gross tasting, I've over the years gotten in the habit of just emptying my capsules into whatever drink. And I'm not terribly averse to something tasting bad. But, like beef liver capsules could be a little challenging. There's a few of them that are like, I don't know. But what do you think about that with people that, a lot of people listen to this show, take tons of supplements, and I do too. And I've figured out kind of what works with me, even without your technology. Is there any risk in kind of surprising our biome with too much stuff?
Of course it is. I mean, remember, anything that your body doesn't need, it has to actually find a way to get rid of it. And anytime the body has to get rid of toxins, it is using something that it doesn't need to do. That means it's actually you're harming it. Many times, many of these things actually cause inflammation in your body. And fundamentally, what we learn from many of our users, now that we have analyzed over 500,000 samples.
You're up to 500,000 now?
500,000
I think last time we spoke, it was maybe 100 or
five-
maybe less.
Yeah, 500,000 samples we have analyzed. And what we learn is the people actually tell us that food that they were eating every day is exactly the one we told them to avoid because they were causing inflammation and their body completely changed.
Wow.
Right. So things that we think are really healthy may not be healthy. I mean, we sometimes look at all the green stuff and say, well, you need to lay off all that stuff because it's actually harming you. And then 6 months later, when you do a retest, we say, okay, this stuff is actually okay for you to eat now. So it's not forever. It's not, Luke, you're banned from eating broccoli.
Right.
It's like now.
Which I wouldn't mind.
But,
Don't mess with my avocados, though.
There you go. But even if we do tell you it's bad for you, it doesn't mean it's forever. It only means until we figure out that your body is now able to actually absorb and uric acid production has come down, that you can start eating avocado again.
Okay.
And that's really the key, is to constantly fine-tune your body. And what's really interesting is many of us spend more time tuning our car than tuning our body. Right? We get the oil change, we get the tuning of the car, tune up of the car, but we don't do that for our human body. Right? Or we treat our human body like a garbage box. I think I heard someone say green tea extract is good. I'm taking that. I heard Dave Asprey talk about nicotine. I'm taking that. Or somebody just told me about this Nucopin. I'm taking that. Somebody told me NAD. I'm taking that. And you take all these things, throwing up in your body like a complete black box. And then we say, I hope it's working for me. Right?
Wow.
And that's all based on faith. In our system, we don't do that. Literally, every time we do a test, we show you all your scores. 400 scores that we do. You can see them changing. So it's simply based on fact, not faith. It's not a hope it's working. You can see it working.
God, I'm just thinking about all the stuff I've taken over the years. And because, I study up, I research things, I interview people like you, I go on websites, I read every little nuanced study, and then I take it.
But guess what? It may have worked for someone else, but not for you.
Right.
Right? And that's the thing. Those people are not you.
Right. Because when you're dealing with studies, people love the studies. I want to see the studies. And I'm like that. I want to make sure it's been used on someone and they didn't just drop dead. But in those studies, another interesting thing about the studies, I interviewed a female hormone expert recently, and she was like, the medical establishment, the scientific community largely ignore the female body when they're doing these studies. So even if, say I was a female and I read a study about, you need X amount of milligrams of this or that, and it does this or that.
It's never designed.
Not for me if I'm that, 35-year-old woman, right?
Interestingly, women were considered as a small man. That's literally what they were banned from all studies because they were too complex.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, that's the reason our daughter started a women's health company called EVVY, E, V as in Victor, V as in Victor, Y, EVVY, EVVY. Only thing she focuses on women's health, and her whole thing was because women were never studied. Right? So she started a company to solve that problem using AI and vaginal microbiome.
Wow.
Right?
Cool.
And so my point is, every one of our kids went on to find an audacious problem to solve. And to me, as a father,
it runs in the family.
Well, it's not that. It's just that you have to, as a father, as a parent, number one thing we can give a gift to our children is give them a gift of curiosity. If we can, instead of taking them to the water and making them drink, what if you can make them thirsty? Because if you make them thirsty, they will find their water and they will drink. How do you make someone thirsty? Make them intellectually curious. They will never stop learning because they're always challenging why.
Yeah, that's me, man.
Right? But guess
Absolutely.
what? Once
Yeah.
you become intellectually curious, you can never stop learning. And once you start learning, you start to come alive because there's no anything you're no longer afraid of because you have knowledge. Knowledge is like a flashlight. In the dark, you can see things now, right? So no longer you have to be afraid that somebody is feeding you wrong information because you are intellectually curious. You challenge, right?
Yeah, I know that. I know that very well. That's why I sit down with people like you once a week, man. Sometimes twice, and have these epic conversations because there's always more. Like, we'll talk today. I'm going to learn so much. We're going to share this information. I'll see you in a year or whenever it is. And I'll be like, what's new? Because you're the same way, you know? Okay, so the thing I'm curious about, being that I know nothing about AI and all of this sophisticated technology that you use, if you can sort of simplify the process of how this data that you're collecting is analyzed. So we have right here, this one's the full body intelligence test. And you guys gave me this at the booth. Thank you very much. I would have liked to have taken the test first and then interviewed you, and talk about it because I think it's interesting when you've done something. So I only did your old one, but I'm going to take the saliva test, the blood prick, the finger prick blood test, and the stool test. Sorry, guys, but it's not as gross as many stool tests, by the way, where you have to fill up a whole.
Oh God, no.
This one's real chill because I did it before. What happens when it gets to the lab?
Oh, very interesting. So the samples comes to a lab. We have a robotic machines that actually now analyze all of the RNA in each of the samples. From each RNA, now we actually pre-process all the samples. So we are able to take out all the messenger RNA, mRNA vaccine, mRNA, non-coding RNA, everything that we need, and then we sequence them. The massive, about 20 billion data points that come out of that. We put them on the cloud, and then we run all the artificial intelligence. What are we trying to do? Now we're trying to learn when certain genes are overexpressed, certain genes are underexpressed, what is going to be your butyrate production? What is going to be your LDL production? What do the vitamin D pathways look like? What's your serotonin production? What's your GABA production? What is going to be impact on your gum health, your dental health? How is going to be the sulfide production, the putrescine production, the ammonia production? And then we say, oh, okay. Now we know all the molecules that are being produced by these gene expression. And then we say, what is good? What is bad, what's causing inflammation, what is not. Now, every food to us is not a food. It is a biochemical activities. Every food has a substrate. And guess what? Our human body is like a chemical factory. Every single substrate you put in there is an input. Based on the input, it changes the output. It's a chemical factory. So we say, oh, if you take broccoli or cabbage or Brussels sprout, you're going to get X milligram of sulfate going into your gut. And these microbes are going to convert them into sulfide. Sulfide causes inflammation. We need to avoid that sulfate containing foods. Right? And then we go through literally your glycemic response, because we built a AI model by actually looking at 1,200 people with continuous glucose monitoring, fed them 35,000 different food, and we built the model so we can say, with your gut microbiome, when you eat carrot, is it going to be high glucose response or low glucose response? And people get so surprised sometimes because almond may be really no glycemic response to some people and very high for someone else. Banana can spike your glucose, a banana can be neutral. Bread can be high glucose response, it could be neutral. And you and I both know intuitively, and we know some people, they can eat all the pasta and bread, they never get fat. And some of us can smell bread and get fat.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. Or just get dysbiosis from it. I have friends that eat gluten. They're like, the gluten thing's a scam. And I'm like, not for me.
Yeah, that's my point.
It wrecks me every time.
And that's the point. It's not the gluten that's good or bad. It's bad for you right now. And maybe a couple of years from now, and you're going to say, look, unless you have a celiac disease, I think I can eat a little bit of gluten now.
You're going to put a lot of doctors and hospitals out of business eventually, and health coaches that are getting people on all these fad diets, right? I mean, I've been into this stuff for 25 years, First, there was vegetarian, fruitarian,
Oh my God.
you know,
Don't even get me going there.
vegan, keto, carnivore. It's exhausting to keep up with.
We analyzed the people who are on different diets. And it turned out, guys, don't kill me for saying that. The keto diet turned out to be the worst diet in terms of aging you, in terms of destruction of your body. People who are on keto diet turns out at least 4 to 5 years older than their chronological age, followed by a paleo diet.
Wow.
Right. And these, because you can't just take a whole macronutrient and get out, leave it.
Yeah.
And a keto diet, when you don't eat carbs, remember carbs are glycans. Every one of your cell in the human body is coated with glycans. When you don't eat enough carbs, it literally destroys your body. And that's the fundamental truth, is that it's okay. Short term, you may lose weight. You may think you're healthier. Just because you're thin doesn't make you healthier.
Do you think sometimes when somebody goes on a very restrictive, regimented diet, that it's just that they're giving their body an opportunity to detox and kind of reset, and so they're seeing these tremendous benefits initially, and so they think, oh, vegan's it, or fruitarian, or keto, or whatever, but then after some time, things kind of reach their baseline again.
And it's more than baseline. They start to starve the underlying nutrition that their body needs. At the end of the day, your brain needs energy. The fastest way of getting energy is through carbs. Glucose, right? Which is carbohydrates, right? So at the end of the day, you have to do that. Other people who go on these diet stuff is, for example, taking artificial sweeteners. That is really, really, really bad for you, including stevia. By the way, there was a research very recently published that shows, just like you were talking about, when we eat sweet stuff, our oral microbiome sends the signal down, sweet stuff is coming, pancreas start releasing insulin. At pancreas releases tons of insulin because they know the sweet stuff is coming. There is no glucose, insulin sits there. Guess what happens? Your body becomes insulin resistant now.
No way.
Yes.
Because your taste buds kind of send the signal that it's sweet, but it has no glucose.
No glucose.
Oh, that is crazy.
And that's the reason a lot of the people, in fact, get fat by eating these artificial sweeteners.
Wow.
And my thinking is, look, if you're going to eat sweet stuff, eat the real stuff. Right? But try.
You're preaching to the choir. I love my ice cream.
And by the way, I'm not going to tell you that sugar is good for you. I mean, it is bad for you. That's universally unhealthy.
Does the dose make the poison though?
It is an amount. It's not the little bit of sugar that's going to kill you. Remember, your body is designed to do that. That's why you have pancreas. If you didn't need sugar, you won't have pancreas to release insulin. It is when you eat too much sugar, your insulin cannot take care of it. And that's when you start to have problems. But anytime, never ever give up things. You start to moderate things. And that's what, is all about moderation, avoiding the foods that are currently causing you inflammation. So you let your body to heal, and then you can start to introduce them again.
Okay. As far as the testing goes, having done a lot of different lab testing over the years, normally it's been when there's kind of something going on, something wrong, right? So taking a stool test, you might find that you have a parasitic infection. You could take hair mineral analysis test and see some heavy metals in there, mineral deficiencies, imbalances. You could do a challenge urine test and find heavy metals and things like that. You see where I'm going with that? Which can get very expensive, and you have to have a doctor, of course, that's willing to order those labs. Your insurance might not cover it. And then you need someone who's proficient in actually determining what those labs mean and giving you lifestyle and diet recommendations. In a Viome test, are you going to find any parasites or,
of course,
or any of that stuff?
So we look at every single organism that is active and alive is what we see.
Okay.
If it is dead, we don't see it.
Okay.
And the reason is, most of the other tests that you do, they're looking at DNA of the organism. That means all the dead stuff. So if you eat food, whether it's a plant food or meat, there is a lot of DNA that comes from that food. And it simply is passing through as dead. And if you look at the stool, they're going to see, oh, you have all this stuff. They're all dead.
Oh, that's interesting. That's funny because you remind me of doing viral testing years ago, blood, to look for Epstein-Barr and Lyme and all this kind of stuff.
We see all of that.
Yeah, and I remember my test showing all of this viral, I guess metabolites or whatever present. But then they say, oh, don't worry, you don't have that virus. And I thought, well, it's right there on the test, and I never really understood. Is that because you're seeing, sort of a legacy echo of that or something?
That's right. So most other companies will look at the DNA and they're looking at dead stuff.
Okay.
In our stuff, we only see stuff because RNA, it has to be alive and replicating.
So would you see like the metabolites of a tapeworm or something in your test?
We will see every tapeworm, every fungi, whether in every virus, every bacteria, every phages, which are basically viruses that infect bacteria. So we see phages, viruses, fungi, bacteria, the largest database of everything, right? We see every strain of them, not just a species, every strain of them. And then we can actually see how much they are how active they are by looking at their expressions, RNA. So we know what is expressing higher, what's expressing lower. What we saw was in colorectal cancer, an organism called Fusobacterium nucleatum is 500 times more active when you have colorectal cancer versus, say, an IBD is 10 times or IBS 5 times.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. And so if you're doing the Viome testing and you're getting this aggregate of data and then you're getting recommendations on diet, lifestyle, and even, which is so awesome,
and supplements,
the custom supplementation. What if something does present like a pathogenic bacteria? Like I just took a nasal test and found that I have something called Marcons, like this gnarly, sinus infection that's apparently really hard to get rid of. Or someone, presents with heavy metals, they have high lead or mercury. What are the recommendations on how to deal with something like that?
So we will, of course, recommend you with some of the antimicrobial stuff that's, food that are antimicrobial, or the ingredients in supplement that are antimicrobial. And then we also try to actually corner them out by giving you the set of probiotics so they actually take over, so that actually the things that are pathogenic, they actually don't have much of a room to grow, right? So think about, every one of us probably have C. diff. And people think of C. diff, am I going to die? The C. diff can kill you, but C. diff in a small quantity actually it can be butyrate producer, and also it can prime the pump of your immune system to remain active, right? Same type of thing. It's not that, even in your mouth, you can get periodontitis, or at the same time, you can have a organism that may not become pathogenic. Akkermansia is another great example. A lot of companies sell them as a probiotic. And that is exactly the organism that is number one cause for MS. So don't put Akkermansia in your body and you may develop MS. And that to me is really the thing with people is they need to know, don't treat your body like a black box. Don't put anything in your mouth unless you test.
Wow, that's super cool. What were you saying about the Alzheimer's and the oral biome?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically what happens is when you have inflammation in your gum, as I was saying that now the gums start to bleed. And now the pathogens or all organisms in your mouth now starting to go into your blood. What does blood do? It starts now, immune system is starting to inflame all over your body. And now you have systemic inflammation. Some of these organisms start to now infect your blood-brain barrier. And when they start to infect blood-brain barrier, what happens? It becomes permeable, just like gut lining, just like your gum lining. And now the bacteria start to go up in the brain. This is the number one reason for neurodegenerative diseases. Now they're finding it is the pathogenic viruses and bacteria that are in your brain that are in fact are the ones that our glial cells start to release amyloid beta to actually protect itself. It's like an immune system response against these viruses and bacteria. And that itself now gets tangled and causes a neurodegenerative disease. Many of the drugs, they try to remove the amyloid beta. The fact is that is not the cause. That is a response to the inflammation. That's a response to the pathogenic infection.
So your body's actually doing its job.
Body's trying to do the job, right? So the point is you got to get rid of the infection, not the thing that's trying to protect it from the infection.
Right. Okay.
And that's the reason all these drugs fail.
Okay.
In fact, there was a research that just came out that whole amyloid beta theory, in fact, it was pulled out because guy made up the data.
Oh, I remember that. That
Yeah.
was very recent. Yeah.
Yes, very recent.
God, and there was a big scandal with not a big scandal, but it was kind of let be known that the SSRI
Yes.
industry was basically a sham too.
Total sham. Can you believe that?
It's like,
I mean,
oh,
whole
man.
drugs are being given to people for depression, these SSRI drugs, and it turned out to be a completely bogus science.
Wow. What are you going to find in your testing in terms of neurotransmitters? Speaking of mood, depression, anxiety,
Absolutely.
these kind of
So
things.
we in fact show you your serotonin production, your GABA production. So we look at all of that stuff. And ultimately, remember, your gut and brain are connected, right? So if you can actually adjust your gut microbiome, we see a tremendous response in people against depression and anxiety.
Wow. Many people have concerns when it comes to anything that involves genetic DNA testing about data mining. And there have been companies that have come out in this space that seem to be creating value more on the data than they are on the actual service or the information provided. What's your perspective on the privacy issue of people's data?
So the two parts of the thing. Remember, the DNA is something that is unique to you that never changes. We don't do DNA. So even if, since we do RNA, it is constantly evolving.
I see.
Even, year, 2 year, 5 year later, your RNA would have completely changed. So it's not, I can go back. However, even better than that, we completely anonymize the data. We always take the personally identifiable information, completely separate it out, encrypt it, take other information, encrypt it separately. Now, every one of us knows our goal is to actually aggregate this information to be able to understand why people have diabetes, why people are developing cancers, why people are actually having depression or anxiety or any of the other chronic diseases. And this is how we learn. This is how we were able to figure out that simply from your saliva, we can detect early stage cancer. So in fact, Luke, I'm not sure you know or not, we launched a cancer detect product.
Oh, I saw that on your site, yeah.
So we launched a cancer detect product just with a spit of your saliva. We are able to detect stage 1 cancer in your mouth or your throat. And that is just the beginning. 95% specificity, 90% plus sensitivity. Any sign of cancer in your mouth or throat. Current standard of care is 70%. We received FDA breakthrough device designation.
Really?
Yeah. What FDA breakthrough device designation means is no test like this exists today.
Congratulations. Right. Did you say 17% is the standard of care
70,
accuracy?
70.
70. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, it's really interesting is that is just the beginning, because now we are looking at esophageal cancer. We are looking at colon polyps before they become cancerous. 10 years later, they can become cancerous. So what if we can detect colon polyps and you can get them removed before they become cancerous?
Wow.
Right? What if you can detect early MCIs before they become Alzheimer? What if you can detect high insulin before you become diabetic? And that's our goal, is to understand what causes the progression of diseases, what causes the onset of the diseases, prevent them early, diagnose them early if you come to us late, and then find a way to cure them if you come to us late. And now we are working with pharmaceutical companies to understand if these genes are overexpressed when people have disease and it's already too late, can they come up with a drug that will suppress those gene expression or reduce the gene expression, amplify the things that are low, and bring the people back into homeostasis?
What about you mentioned something about IBS?
Yes.
And we're talking about the gut largely here. What's the deal with that? Why is this becoming such a problem in Crohn's disease? I mean, you have so many people that have such gnarly problems in their gut.
IBS, 15% of the population suffers from IBS. This is the irritable bowel syndrome. And that's really, to me, is all catch-all. That means you have stomach ache, you have constipation, you have diarrhea, you have bloating, and you have this massive problems, and it's all IBS. We have had an amazingly great success with people who have these symptoms. As I said, we have analyzed 500,000 people. We, in fact, did a study that we published. People who took our supplements and our diet recommendations for 4 months, their IBS clinical score, called IBS SSS, symptom severity score, came down by 40%, 40,
In 4 months?
in 4 months.
Wow.
Their depression score, clinical score measured by PHQ-9 came down by 36%. Their anxiety score measured by GAD-7 clinical score, 32%. Their HbA1c, the diabetes score came down by 30%. This is simply using food and nutrition as a medicine.
That's crazy. Have you guys looked into anything having to do with the genetic expression as it pertains to alcoholism and addiction?
In fact, there was a study published that they had 18 people that had alcohol addiction. And all they did was change their microbiome. In this case, they used fecal transplant and the alcohol addiction went away.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Damn. That is so interesting.
So, by the way, coming back to IBD,
Yeah,
IBD is a inflammatory bowel disease, and that's Crohn and colitis. And that what happens is now you have a serious amount of inflammation in your gut. Remember, same DNA, same organism. It basically goes into remission and then it goes into relapse. Same thing, but depending on what foods you're eating, what's going on in your body, suddenly you start to have inflammation. We, in fact, have many people tell us that their inflammation, they no longer have relapses in IBD anymore. Right? And again, I'm not suggesting ever that we have a cure or prevention for these because FDA would not like that. So going back again, we do not cure any disease. We do not prevent any disease.
We get that.
Right. I just want to make sure that people know that. This is a wellness test. What we're trying to do is to reduce the underlying inflammation in the body so that you can actually get rid of these diseases.
I get that. Good disclaimer there. What about mitochondrial function?
Absolutely.
And the detection of leaky gut? Mitochondrial function is very ambiguous for most of us. We don't really know. And then leaky gut, I think everyone thinks they have leaky gut. We don't really know if anyone can tell us for sure if we actually have it. There's like symptoms that people identify.
We actually do. We do know when you have a leaky gut. So there is a couple of ways. So let's start one thing at a time. So leaky gut. There are a couple of ways to know that you have a leaky gut. So in the stool test, we also look at epithelial cell shedding. So the more epithelial cells are shedding, that means there is a lot of inflammation going on. That's the first sign of you actually will have, potentially you may have a leaky gut. Other thing that is very clear, there is one single biomarker called LBP, lipopolysaccharide binding protein. That is now correlated 99% with leaky gut. So if you can measure your lipopolysaccharide binding protein, you know you have a leaky gut. Right? There are other tests people do. The things people drink the stuff and then they measure in the urine, and that's another way of detecting leaky gut.
Okay.
And there was other question you were asking about mitochondria.
Yeah.
So we actually, when we're looking at all the gene expression, remember what's happening. We lyse the cell, we break open the cell in the blood. When you break open the cell, what do you get? You get all your mitochondrial gene expression. Most people may not know. You get your DNA from your mom and dad in your cell, and there is a separate organelle in your cell that's a separate DNA other than your mom and dad that is most people believe came from an ancient bacteria that provides the energy for the cell. It has its own DNA. In fact, guess what? We analyze all the gene expression of that mitochondria. Now we can measure your mitochondrial biogenesis, right? We can look at all of your active ATP production. Most people know that high school biology, right?
Yeah.
So we can see all of that stuff by analyzing all the mitochondrial gene expression.
That's so, I can't wait to take this freaking test. If I was at home now, I would just mail this tomorrow. That's so cool.
But you can do it here, you know that, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, in fact, tomorrow morning,
okay.
You poop every day, you take the touch of a stool.
Let's hope so.
And you actually finger prick your blood in the morning when you wake up, and you spit your saliva in a tube and you're done, and put them in a mailbox wrap at the desk, and 7 days later you'll have the results.
It only takes 7 days?
7 to 8 days.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing, dude. Well, listen, I know you got people to meet and places to be here. Thank you so much for coming back on the show. Like I said, you're the kind of guy you walk in a room and everyone's in a good mood. I mean, it's just, you have a really great effect in that way. And I love the work you're doing, man. It's just so interesting to me. And I mean, you probably know this, but you're going to change the game here in such a meaningful way. You're going to put a lot of supplement companies out of business. People are going to realize they don't need a lot of the stuff, myself included. I have a pantry full of all this, and, I got it pretty dialed in. I know the basic 10 a day that I want to take, but the guesswork is costing a lot of people, probably some side effects too. So think it's very cool.
I mean, we have to stop selling based on fear. We have to start using the data to tell people this is what's happening in your body and this is all you need. Right?
Yeah.
And people are afraid, how can I sell you more stuff if people know what's going on?
Yeah, totally. No, that's a great distinction. That's a great note to end on. And I'll cover the rest of it when I do the intro and the outro. We'll let you get out of here. But thanks again, man.
Thanks a lot, Luke. Always a pleasure. Always an honor to speak with you. You're such a great energy, such a great soul. And I want to thank you again for doing what you do and bringing this knowledge to the world. Everyone who's listening to it, please make sure you send a note to Luke for what he does. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.